This is the format that I will use to explain the topic because this is my aim, to explain the topic to my students. So in this case, I decided to use the direct method. Why? The direct method is a technique when the teacher introduces English directly to the students. In this case, the teacher is the person who explains the topic and the students listen what the teacher says. Yes. In this stage, that is the teacher presentations, has a duration of 15 minutes. Now I'm going to talk about another stage that in this case is the control practice. In this case, my aim is to put into practice the topic learned by my students. So in this case, I will provide my students photocopies with interactive activities in order they remember the sound and identify the correct pronunciation. So in this stage, I will give my students two activities. Activity number one, it's about to listen to audios, in this case A and B, about challenges at work, and then choose whether the answer is true or false. At the end of these activities, students will check their answer. The second activity is listen the audio A again and create a glossary with the words that contain these sounds. For example, in the word forget or never. When the students finish putting together the glossary, I will choose 1, 2, and maybe 3 students at random, and I will tell them to read the words with the correct pronunciations. Both activities have a duration of 10 minutes, and these are the activities. Activity number 1, activity number 2, and the audio about challenges at work. Now, I would like to say another thing about these activities. As a teacher, I can teach another features. Yes, for example, in activity number 1, I can teach strong and weak forms. Why? Because it's very important for me to emphasize that weak forms occurs in a small, less important words than link your imperative can contain words of a sentence together. Yes, these weak forms were what we call function words, and typically they are auxiliary verbs, preposition, pronouns, conjunction, and articles. So, in the audio about challenges at work, I have this sentence. For example, I had traveled to their office. If I teach my students strong and weak forms, I can say that in the word had, we have a strong form, and in the word to, we have weak form. I had traveled to their office, sorry, yes? Now, in the activity number 2, I can teach my students word stress. Why? In this case, when we talk about word stress, it's very important to know that stress or accent is the relative emphasis or prominence given to a certain syllable in a word or to certain word in a phrase or sentence. So, in the glossary that my students will create, they can write the word never, yes? In the word never, the accentuation is in the first syllable. So, in the first activity, I can teach as another feature the strong and weak forms, and in the activity number 2, I can teach what is the turn of the less control practice, that is another stage. In this case, again, I will give my students photocopies, but are different activities. In this case, the activity number 1 is to read the conversation between Marco, Dora, and Charles about a birthday parties. In this case, my students will choose 3 or 4 sentences from the transcript, and using general American pronunciations, they will transcribe those sentences, paying attention to words that contain the voice plus alveolar approximant sounds. When my students finish the activity, I will choose students at random, yes, again, and I will tell them to read the transcription with the American pronunciation in order to make a difference with the British English. As a second activity in this stage, that is the less control practice, I will tell my students to transcribe the following sentence, yes, taking into account the British pronunciation and mark the different types of voice post-alveolar proximal sound, explaining in class with the correct symbol. For example, this sentence are, when we heard about the offer of a house on a small island, he accepted. 2. She would stare at the blank screen. 3. After about an hour of struggling, she would give up and begin wandering around the apartment incessantly. When the students finish the activity, I will choose 1 or 2 students, in this case at random again, and I will tell them to read the transcription, but in this case with the British pronunciation in order to make a difference with the American English, yes? These are the activities. This is the activity number 1 in the less control practice, the conversation between Marco, Dora, and Charles, and this is to transcribe the following sentence using the British pronunciation. Another topic that I can teach to my students using both activities, yes, 1 and 2, but of the less control practice, I can teach my students syllabicity and aspirations, which are word allophones. So when we talk about syllabicity, I can say to my students that a syllabic consonant or vocalic consonant, yes, is a consonant that forms a syllable on its own in some pronunciations. And there are 3 cases, yes? The case, the consonants voice alveolar lateral, the case of the voice alveolar nasal, and the voice bilabial nasal, yes? But taking into account the second activity, yes, that in this case is to transcribe, I can say my students to mark aspirations, yes, and other allophones. When we talk about aspirations, I can say my students that the 40s voiceless plosive, in this case, the voiceless 40s bilabial plosive, the voiceless 40s alveolar plosive, and the voiceless 40s velar plosive precede vowel sounds in ascending stressed syllable. We use aspiration. So, in this transcript about Margot, Dora, and Charles, yes, and Charles, I can mention in the word party, for example, we identify aspirations, and in the word different, we identify syllabicity. And this is an example of what I said.
In the word party, we have aspirations, and in the word different, we have syllabicity.
And finally, the free practice stage. In this stage, my aim is to make my students share their creativity. Why? Because I will encourage my students to create a short, interesting conversations on a topic of their choice that contain words with the voice post-alveolar approximant sound. My students can choose British or American pronunciations, and then we share the conversation in class with their classmates. So this stage has a duration of 15 minutes. And in this case, I decided to use writing and speaking as my techniques. Now, I would like to mention that in this activity, apart to promote creativity, a different alternative to teaching in this activity is intonation. Why? Because intonation in phonetics is the melodic pattern of an utterance. Yes, it conveys difference in expressing meanings, surprise, anger, or delight, and may also serve as grammatical function. Yes, so intonation is primarily a matter of variation in the tone of the voice. So I decided that I can teach this feature in this activity. So depending on the creation of the conversation of my students, they will be able to work with stress, sound production, and they will be careful with expressing questions in spoken English. A part of this, they will identify whether is or low or high tone arises or appears in their voices. So intonation is another feature that I can teach in this stage. That is the free practice. So these are all the stage of my lesson plan. In those activities, the supraximental feature that I decided to teach is the different kinds of the voice pulse alveolar approximants with with the correct pronunciation. Yes, taking into account the Spanish, British, and American English. The anticipating problem that might arise when it comes to students' productions of this feature is that my students may find hard to articulate and transcribe correctly these sounds. So a possible solution for this is that I will provide some examples into words or phrases in order to make my students aware of their mistakes in transcriptions and pronunciations of the target sounds. Also, in these lessons, for the development of my activities, I decided to use control practice and guide practice as my steps in practicing a new song because in control practice, students work with new sounds, yes, and in this case, the voice post alveolar approximant sounds, in a very structured way, yes, and need this control practice when they begin to learn a new song. So it gives them time to concentrate on reproducing the tone and lip movements without also having to decide what words they're going to say or what grammatical forms they need. In guided practice, yes, that is the other step. In this case, the students must use the sounds being practiced in order to complete the different tasks. So that's all about my lesson plan, and thank you for your attention.